From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. K-State's Robin Reid will talk about an online analytical tool that you agricultural producers can use to assess your financial status via benchmarking, comparing your operations to those of peers in your region of the state. Robin will tell how to fully utilize that tool. Then K-State's Brian Briggeman and from the Kansas Cooperative Council, Brandi Miller, look ahead to two informational meetings that will be held in August consecutively, the K-State Symposium on Cooperative Issues and the K-C-C Leadership Roundtable. These are designed for anyone in agricultural cooperative leadership positions, including farmers. Further ahead then, with Stop, Look, and Listen, K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven, here on Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggle to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
You're listening to Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. One of the true tenets of good farm financial management is a concept we regularly refer to when we talk about farm and ranch economics, and that's benchmarking. Well, Kansas State University and the Agricultural Economics Department, once again, has made handy for you producers a benchmarking tool to allow you to compare your status economically with that of your peers across the state. And Robin Reid is back with us once more, agricultural economist with K-State Research and Extension, to talk about how this tool can help you producers get a realistic handle on where you stand economically. The idea of benchmarking, though, Robin, it's often played up and with good reason, right?
Yeah, well, the idea is you can know where you're at in relationship to your peers. So with a lot of these ratios, we kind of have some industry standards or, scorecard numbers of what's good and what's bad. But that really varies based on the type of farm and the situation that the farm is in. So what I looked at when I made this tool a few years ago and updated every year as I did this past week is looking at if a farm could compare to a similar farm in its region with its size, so number of cropland acres, and if there's a cattle component and how big that cattle component is, a farm can really isolate down to farms that are comparable to itself and see how are they doing in relation to their peers.
And there's a value in doing so when times economically are less than ideal?
Absolutely. So, yeah, now more than ever, as I've been saying for a couple of years now, in the downturn in the farm economy, the ones that are really going to get through this are the ones that are keeping an eye on their financials and getting some alerts by looking at tools like this if something is starting to not look good and making adjustments before there is no room for an adjustment in their operation.
So tell us more about the components of this tool, found on agmanager.info, of course, and how a producer can employ it for this purpose.
Sure. So what we're talking about is the KSU Farm Financial Benchmarking Tool. And this was developed using farms in our Kansas Farm Management Association. So we have about 1,200 farms across the state that work with a trained economist and regularly report their financials to us to do research with. And so what I've done is taken their financial ratios in 2018 and then an average in the last 10 years and made these into distributions that a producer can take their own farm and lay within the distribution to see where it falls amid the Kansas Farm Management Association farms.
When you say you use financial ratios for this kind of comparison, that's a list of ratios, not just one or two?
So there's 11 different ratios in the tool, and everything from current ratio and working capital to debt to asset, and then looking at profitability ratios, rate of returns, asset turnover, things like that, and then expense ratios, operating expenses, depreciation, interest, and net farm income. And just seeing how the distribution of the farms within the group you select and where their ratios are at.
To help illustrate what this can do for a producer in assessing their financial well-being, you have a couple of examples that you've worked through.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be kind of interesting. Something I've never done on the radio before is just taking a couple groups and showing where their ratios are. So again, the point of this tool is to compare where you're at compared to these farms, but I just thought it'd be interesting to look at some trends. So the two groups I picked out were operators that were under 40 years across the state, what their farms were doing financially, and then operator age over 60 years across the state and how those two groups compare. And overall, 2018 was not a bad year for most of our Kansas farms, and a lot of that due to the marketing facilitation program and those payments that we received last year. But net farm income for our farmers less than 40 years of age averaged real close to $100,000, and that's really not far off of the 10-year average, which was about $108,000. So this really helped their ratios this past year than what I've seen in the 2 years prior. So our current ratio with this group, the younger group of farms, is about 2.0. So what that means is about $2 of current assets for every dollar of current liabilities they have. And this is a pretty good number. But the nice thing about this tool is it gives you a distribution. And what you'll see is there's a lot of farms that are only $1 to $1.50 for current assets versus current liabilities. And obviously this spills over to their working capital, or how much money do they have if they would take all their current assets and liquidate them to pay their current liabilities. And the younger group has a little less than $200,000. But there's 20% of these farms that have $0 or less, meaning negative working capital. 20% of our younger farms.
And that's not good.
That's not good. But when we look over to our older group, so farms that have an operator over 60 years of age, they actually had slightly less net farm income last year, about $77,000 versus $100,000. But they also slightly less than their 10-year average, about $90,000. Their current ratios, though, are better. They tend to have more money to pay their current liabilities in what they have in current assets. Typically, they're around $4, so that's a very strong cash position. And that translates into working capital being over $330,000. Now, again, we're seeing an increase in the older group, too, that has farms that are $0 or less in working capital, though. So it's not just our younger farms that are struggling financially. It is across the board. But in general, as we would expect, our older farmers are in a better financial position.
One of the other commonly cited ratios that you hear discussed, Robin, when it comes to analyzing a farm's economic situation, the debt-to-asset ratio. Did you look at that for these two groups?
Absolutely, and that's something we really monitor as we've been through multiple years of the downturn in the farm economy. How much debt is the farm accumulating in relation to the total assets that they have? So again, in looking at my young group of farmers compared to my older group of farms, the debt to asset on our young farmers is about 45%. So 45% of their operation is owed to a lender. Versus our older farms, and these were 2018 numbers, that number is about 16%. It's not surprising that our older farmers should be out of the debt picture a lot more than our younger farms. You know, in the 10-year average, this is the trend as well. Our younger farmers are about 40% in debt when you're looking at the debt-to-asset ratio. And our older farmers, that in the 10-year average has been about 10%. So both those numbers are increasing, but a stark difference between our younger farmers and our older farmers.
And you have worked up numbers as well, return on assets, return on equity, and again, important barometers of where one stands. Will you see anything in those numbers that stand out?
Yeah, so when we look at profitability, you know, what we've analyzed so far is just the financial position. But when we look at profitability, it's interesting the difference between our young farmers and our old farmers as well, and it's the other way around. So our younger farmers in 2018 had a return on assets of a little over 5%, and that was about what they did in their 10-year average as well. Now our older farmers, profitability is historically lower for them. And in 2018, they only received about a 1% return on their assets. And the 10-year average was even lower than that, a 0.2% return on assets. So even though they're in a stronger financial position, profitability-wise, the younger farmers are actually outperforming them.
And these are the kinds of comparisons that one can make by using this tool with their peers, not necessarily by age group, but by the nature of their enterprises and so forth, right?
Yeah. So again, I picked out these two groups just to look at some interesting trends. But, what a person can do if they're a younger farmer, say less than 40, they can go to the tool, go to the state tab, and compare themselves with this group and say, I've been talking about average values, but where does a particular young farmer fall within those distributions is really the educational value to that person. Just, as I talk to debt to asset ratio, we have a growing number of farms that are over 70%. So for every dollar of assets they have, over 70% of that is actually owed to a creditor. So
that's being leveraged to a dangerous level.
Yes. And, something like that would not be recognized when you're just looking at average values. So you can, in this tool, specify a cumulative distribution, which means when you put your farm in there, it will tell you exactly what percentage of farms are higher than your value and lower than your value. So you can easily say, well, I am performing better than 60% of farms within this cohort group that I selected.
Well, really, any time is a good time for a producer to reassess where they're at. You don't need to wait for the winter break, so to speak. It would be worthwhile anytime you sense the need to really pin down where you stand economically on your farm or ranch. And Robin, it's as simple as going to Ag Manager and looking up the Farm Financial Benchmarking tool?
Yes, so if you go into Ag Manager, it'll be under the Tools section, pretty straightforward there, and you're looking for the KSU Farm Financial Benchmarking tool.
So producers, if you've not done this in a while, it would be worth your time to benchmark your operation and see where things are for you currently. We appreciate the time. Robin, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Agricultural economist Robin Reid, K-State Research and Extension. Again, find the tool at agmanager.info. And we'll return shortly with more on this Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. On this segment, we're previewing 2 events that run in tandem, and that pairing, if you will, has served very successfully in recent years as the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center here at Kansas State University has joined in with the Kansas Cooperative Council to put on these 2 events. One is the K-State Symposium on Cooperative Issues, and the other is the K-C-C Leadership Roundtable. The symposium takes place August the 20th, and the Leadership Roundtable August the 21st, both here on the K-State campus. Joining us now is the director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center, K-State's Briggeman, and from the Kansas Cooperative Council, President and Chief Executive Officer, Brandi Miller. Talk a bit about this working relationship, how that's served quite a purpose in education in regard to our cooperatives in Kansas. Brian, start with you.
Sure, Eric, and thank you for having us on. So the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center is a public-private partnership between Kansas State University and the Kansas Cooperative Council. And it was created back in 1984 with the purpose of helping cooperatives better understand the environment that they're currently operating in, really to just give back to the farmer cooperative industry in Kansas. And working very closely today with the Kansas Cooperative Council and Brandi, we're continuing that mission.
And Brandi, talk about this working relationship and this interaction from the council's vantage point, if you would.
Absolutely. So we certainly value our relationship with Arthur Capper Cooperative Center, and especially Brian's expertise. We leverage him on numerous programming that we do with the council and just appreciate having that resource. What I really appreciate is the center itself certainly understands the industry as a whole and the impacts that the industry has on the state, and also, as Brian mentioned, surrounding states too.
Well, these two events combine to make a rather powerful 2 days of information and exchange of ideas on agricultural cooperatives, how they serve the state of Kansas, and the patrons that are tied into those cooperatives. Let's take a quick look first at the Symposium on Cooperative Issues. It's set for, again, Tuesday, August the 20th, the venue for both of these, the Alumni Center on the K-State campus. So your theme, Brian, this year is disruptions facing cooperatives. To what does that refer?
Well, one of the things, again, like Brandi said, working closely together on this program, the symposium, as well as the Leadership Roundtable, I'm out across the countryside, and so is Brandi, and we get together and we talk about, well, what are some of the issues that you're hearing about? What are some of the challenges or opportunities that are facing cooperatives? And one thing that we consistently hear is disruptions within the marketplace, that the industry has changed so rapidly with it becoming more global, and then looking at all the different things that come in and affect us, and then also thinking about the different challenges that are out there, especially like in agronomy, grain marketing, different issues our directors have to face. So that's kind of the idea behind focusing on disruptions. And the approach that we're taking is to bring in some experts, leverage some experts that we have here at Kansas State University, and also reach out internationally to bring in some perspectives, some issues that cooperative is dealing with actually in South Africa.
So then, whom is on the agenda and what topics specifically will they address?
So the symposium, as we put together this program, really is focused in on appealing to cooperative managers, employees, as well as directors, but also, too, for anyone interested in co-ops and wants to know a little bit more. So to kick off the program, we have Mike Boland, who is a professor at the University of Minnesota, and some of your listeners may recognize him. He used to be a professor at Kansas State University. Mm-hmm. And he is going to come in and bring his expertise on a lot of issues that he has worked with other co-ops in Minnesota as well as across the United States that really affect at the board level. And since we'll have employees in the room as well, he has worked up a few case study vignettes, very short roundtable discussion topics for the audience members to say, hey, here's an issue that a cooperative dealt with. How would you handle it? So it really is aimed at working on that director education as well as the employee education. Then we'll move into Brett Briggeman with Winfield United. Definitely there's a lot of things coming in from new technologies that are being developed, as well as new competitors that are out there. Brett will lend his expertise and provide his comments there from a Winfield United perspective. Next, one of our own professors in the agricultural economics department, Joe Jansen. Joe has his expertise in grain marketing. So he's going to talk a lot about what are different issues that are going on in grain marketing, certainly talk about trade, and then also bring in some of his research that he's done, in particular thinking about locations of various grain elevators and what does that mean for co-ops and farmers, and just how is that competitive landscape shaping up. I'll provide an update as well in some of the various research that I've been working with some of my graduate students, in particular on the economic impacts of cooperatives to the state of Kansas. We'll have a nice discussion on that. And then also I'll lead into the interview, Eric, that you will actually be conducting with our guest farmer from South Africa. His name is Dirk van Poppendorp, and I got to know Dirk when I was in South Africa last semester, worked with him and his co-op, Central Sued Cooperative, or SSK. He's the board chairman for SSK, and he also runs his own farming operation. And Dirk he's a co-op guy through and through, and it's just really fascinating to hear someone from a developing country who utilizes modern farming practices, who runs a co-op that's about $250 million in sales. It's just, an interesting perspective, some of the things that he'll be able to bring out. So that, we've got a full day set up that I think will appeal to many who are interested in cooperatives.
It's a diverse symposium, to be sure, an excellent program through and through on the 20th of August. Then there is the event that bridges the two sessions together, and that is a reception that evening with a guest speaker. Brandi, I want to bring you in and have you share a bit about that.
Absolutely. So after the symposium concludes, we do have a reception and dinner, and then we have our kickoff speaker. And this year we've invited Jeff Butler, and he is an internationally renowned speaker. We've asked him to come and actually talk about cultivating leadership in today's workplace. And so, as Brian mentioned, the target audience for this particular event is both farmer directors that serve on cooperative boards as well as managers. And so I'm really excited to have him come and share some of that information with us.
And once more, he'll be featured during the reception and dinner on the evening of the 20th. And that'll carry things over until the next day, which is the K-C-C Leadership Roundtable. Brandi, go ahead and follow through with a rundown of what's planned for that half day.
Absolutely. And so as Brian mentioned, when we really look at this program, we talk a little bit about how we can make these two synergetic. And our plan is to focus on the future. And so just like Brian, as I'm traveling through the state, I continue to hear about hot topics. And so our plan with the second day is we're going to kick off the morning with Rocky Weber. He's the president and general counsel for Nebraska Cooperative Council, so my peer up to the north. And Nebraska Cooperative Council recently invested a significant amount of time and effort into researching perceptions of young producers in the cooperative space. And so he's going to come and share that research with us. I think it'll be really fascinating, and we'll get a lot of information from that we can certainly reapply in Kansas. After that, Dr. Jason Griffin from Kansas State University, which many of you may have actually heard about Jason because he's been doing a lot of education in the state, is going to talk about industrial hemp, some of the agronomic needs, as well as what the future of this potential commodity looks like in Kansas. And then we're going to end with sustainability, and we're going to have Dr. Jennifer Wells with Land O'Lakes come and talk about the impact of sustainability on Kansas farmers. And so sustainability is one of those buzzwords that you hear a lot about, but she's going to talk and kind of unpack what sustainability even means and what it looks like, and really how you can deploy sustainability practices on your farm.
These are technically two separate events, the symposium, the roundtable, but they are complementary, and so attendees would probably want to take in both if at all possible. So what are the registration procedures for the symposium and the roundtable? First, the symposium, Brian.
Well, you can go online at www.accc.ksu.edu and can register online. You can also contact the Kansas Cooperative Council. The registration deadline is August 6th, so get out there soon to register for both events.
And that same deadline holds for the Leadership Roundtable, right, Brandi?
That is correct, yep. And the same registration process applies for both. So we manage the registration collectively, and what Brian mentioned will work for both events.
To find out more about these events, you can go to accc.ksu.edu. That's the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center website, or the Kansas Cooperative Council site. Likewise, www.kansasco-op.coop. Ought to be a good day and a half, chock full of information of value to those who have anything to do with our agricultural cooperatives in Kansas, coming up the 20th and the 21st of August here on the K-State campus. And Brian, Brandi, thanks so much for the previews.
Thanks so much for letting us participate today.
Thank you, Eric.
Along with us, the director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State, Brian Briggeman, and the president and chief executive officer of the Kansas Cooperative Council, Brandi Miller. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll be back with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
Many years ago, I built a pergola in front of the house to keep the sun out.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
This is a tale of tales. No, it's not the mother of all tales, but we're talking about tales. It's a tale about tales. Now, for anyone who does not speak English, it's a kind of confusing. Even Eric is raising his eyebrow thinking, Vanderhoeven, where are you going with this tale or tale? Of course, he trusts me. He's used to my tales. If you're lost, let me explain. And by the way, to learn to speak a foreign language is not as easy as Babel makes it out to be. You have to understand language. By the time you can joke in a foreign language, you're starting to master it. Now back to my tale of tales. Many years ago, I built a pergola in front of the house to keep the sun out. And at its base, I built a raised flower box 24 feet long. It's 12 inches deep and 12 inches high. Over the years, I've grown petunias and other plants in it. It always has been a great, colorful show. I made sure plants and flowers stood up and they were partly hanging down. Mixing the good soil to support the growing plants could be a challenge, but as long as I had the horses over winter here on the hill, I used the horse manure as added organic matter. It made a difference. What I noticed was that as plants grew and were watered regularly, the toads loved the environment. They would come hopping out and about in the cooler evening. All part of the family, as are the salamanders, which will today scoot in and out from behind the box. Colorful critters. But over the years, more than 40 years now, the wooden planter box has started to show holes, even though I used good wood. But time, soil, and water took its toll. I solved the problem after cleaning the big box out and started to place potted geraniums inside the planter. Some of the plants are very old stock, but beautiful plants. In the box, I have 17 large pots. Then there are a few more pots arranged near the steps. As they are now blooming profusely, it's quite a show. And when people step up to the front door and pass, they remark how special it is. Anneke, my wife, does most of the caring, taking care of the faded flowers and giving them fertilizer. Remember, no horse manure anymore, and these geraniums are potted in large pots. We do overwinter all plants in the homemade greenhouse inside half the garage. Actually, it takes up only 1/4. Buying new plants each year of this size would be prohibitive. The only work I do is water. Water the plants as they need it. And being potted, one needs to keep a good eye on them with the hot weather. The geranium is hardy and can take some abuse, but if you don't want to lose the show, you need water. And that is where the tale starts. When I was watering one evening, I noticed a small rat jump out and carefully walk along the planter box and disappear. Had I still had the dogs, that would have been the end of this story. But we don't have dogs anymore. So the rat disappeared. I was kind of flabbergasted and annoyed. Of course, the rat has to be caught and disposed of. It was just another thing to do. It did annoy me. There's enough to do. And I know I share the hill with them. They're in the old stone rock wall, the stable, and they love the woodpile. And I see a few nests against and in the crotch of the trees away from the house. But I don't want them in the flower box. Actually, I don't want them anywhere. But that's the hill we share. The next morning I checked the live trap, expecting the rat to be caught, as I have caught many before. No rat, but the bait was gone. True, sometimes a trap won't spring, so I applied some WD-40 and reset the trap. The next morning, no rat and no bait. Okay, this is no longer funny. I was getting mad, and I had seen him or her, heaven forbid it is a pregnant her, walk away when I watered. Well, I had some poison, which I nailed to a board. I don't like the stink of a dead rat, but no problem. The baits were chewed off, down to the nail next morning. But no stink, no rat. I was now getting nervous, and very angry and determined. I cleaned the old clasp trap and set it with some good cheese. I had no Dutch cheese, but figured any cheese would do. I now was sure I would catch the beast and made the necessary funeral arrangements. You know, he has sprung the trap twice and eaten the cheese, but no rat. And in all this time, the live trap is still standing with bait, but he no longer touches any of it. My last resort was a sticky glue board. I still had one. I don't like them, as other critters are caught and die a miserable death. I strategically placed it. The next morning I went out early and looked. Glued to the board was 3 inches of a rat's tail. A few days later, I saw him walk with a bobcat tail. I don't give a rat's tail.
Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. And with that, our time is away for today. Thanks to you for tuning in, and please rejoin us right here tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.